Hello ladies and gentlemen, Nick here, and welcome to my ranking of the top 10 Doctor Who Second Doctor Who stories. These are my top 10 Doctor Who stories in the Second Doctor's era, from Power of the Daleks to the War Games, basically. So we've got 10 of his best stories here, and the Second Doctor, he had a very good era, maybe slightly better than the First Doctor, to be honest. However, he had some slightly worse stories as well in some places, so yeah, so it was kind of a bit more of a mixed bag, but generally I think it was slightly better. So, and I prefer Patrick Troughton to William Hartnell anyways. Maybe that helps, but yeah, in some cases I actually wondered how Hartnell would treat some of these situations. I suppose different situations, different doctors, it works differently. So, let's go on to the list, but before we start, here are some honourable and dishonourable mentions. Dishonourable mentions first. And of course, what else could be the dishonourable mention other than my least favourite story of all time? The Space Pirates from Season 6. Yeah, I've covered this in my review and my Season 6 ranking already, but this story is just shit. I've given my reasons why I think that in those other two videos, and yeah, my opinion's not likely to be changing anytime soon. All I'll say is that it's worse every. I watched the originals. I watched the reconstructions of the missing episodes last year, and 4, 5, and 6 weren't as bad as 4, 5, and 6 weren't too bad. They were bad, but they weren't awful. But 1 and 3 were even worse than episode 2, which I previously saw on the Lost in Time box set when I watched all of those episodes when I got the DVD. But after the recent rewatch, all 6 episodes are easily my least favourite 6 of the entire show. Easily the worst 6 episodes. If I was saying top 10 worst individual episodes, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Space Pirates episodes probably go 6, 4, 5, 2, 1, 3. Or 3, then 1. Probably. Hellbent would probably be my 7th least favourite episode. I'll have to see about the other ones. But, yeah, just pretty awful. My honourable mention goes to another Season 6 story, The Seeds of Death. A brilliant sequel, a really good sequel to the Ice Warriors from Season 5 that fixes that story's problems. I had a lot of problems with the Ice Warriors. This story fixes those problems in terms of the characters, anyway. I mean, we don't get to see as much of the Ice Warrior backstory, but I think that was supposed to be in the Lords of the Red Planet story anyway, but to be honest, we don't really get to see that type of story until later on in both Extended Media and then the new series get elements of those stories, because the next 2 Ice Warrior stories in the classic series are Peladon stories, the Peladon ones, and then the Ice Warriors would be in 2 seasons that would, in Season 20, had a story in Season 23, that would not be made because they changed it to Trial of a Time Lord, and a story in Season 27 that didn't get made because the show was eventually cancelled by that point. So the next story that they appeared in the new series was Series 7, which would have been Season 33. So, yeah. And about 39 years since their previous appearance in The Monster of Peladon, which could potentially be worse than Ice Warriors. But we'll see about that in the future. So, our top 10 Second Doctor stories list. Starting off with number 10. Number 10 is a very good Cyberman story, but not an amazing one. The Wheel in Space from Season 5. This is the one story on this list not to be a 9 or 10 out of 10 rated story. This is an 8 out of 10, but this is my favourite of the 8 out of 10 stories, and so it gets the number 10 spot on this ranking, with Seeds of Death being the next best one, getting the honourable mention. And yeah, Wheel in Space, really good story, great Cyberman one, great start for Zoe, some really good stuff, and I enjoyed the Doctor and Jamie's episode on the spaceship. That was actually a pretty good, that was a good episode, and liked that. Thought that was good. wouldn't mind a two-parter where half the episode was them just wandering around the spaceship, discovering clues, trying to solve a mystery. Cliffhanger, part 2 sees them starting to realise the truth and everything. That would have been a very good idea. Although knowing the classic series, it would take them 4 episodes at least. Anyway, moving on to number 9, Patrick Troughton's excellent and amazing final story, The War Games, from Season 6. War Games fans are probably not going to be happy this is so low on the list. However, considering where I had it before I rewatched the story, it wasn't even on this list at all, let alone number 9. So, yeah, but I thought this was a really great way to end Troughton's era, and I thought it was a great way for him, Wendy Padbury and Fraser Hines to leave the show on, and it's just a really good story. Just like 10th Planet, this is a great way for the current Doctor to go out on. Number 8, and this is at the other end of Patrick Troughton's era. This is the War Games for the start of his era. It is his brilliant starter, The Power of the Daleks, from Season 4. Yep, so as War Games was Patrick Troughton's great final story, Power of the Daleks is his great first story. So his first and last stories are around this point on the list. I prefer Power just a little bit more to War Games. I think it's a really amazing Dalek stories. Apart from Mission to the Unknown, the Dalek stories in the 60s were amazing. Or at least very good. So, it made sense that Troughton's first story was a Dalek story, and it works super well. And great animation from BBC Studios. Hopefully it will continue for the Macra Terror, a story that will not be featuring on this list. And the animated version probably won't make me change that. Moving on to number 7 is another partly animated story from Season 4, The Moonbase. This one is another great Cyberman story. I think it's slightly better than Wing Space, but I think it's, compared to the other 3 that we've... I don't know, there's 2 more Patrick Troughton's era. The other 2, I think it's not quite as good as the other 2, but I still think it's a really good and really enjoyable story, and it's one of the best Base Under Siege stories, in my opinion. I really enjoyed it, and got some great moments. So, there you go, The Moonbase. And that was a quick roundup on that. Yeah, I'm trying not to make these rankings too long anymore. Especially as I've got a couple of them to go through today. Okay, number 6. Number 6 was my favourite Season 4 story before the rewatches. But it's still a really good one. And that is The Faceless Ones from Season 4. Yes, really good, really enjoyable. The only thing is that Ben and Polly don't really do that much, considering this is their final story. They don't get a huge amount to do, and it doesn't really work as well as it's not a very good final story for them. But as a story, it's very good and really enjoyable. I wouldn't have minded Samantha Briggs being a companion. I think she would have done a really good job. She would have been the Donna of the 60s, I think, or Lucy Miller from the Big Finish audios. She would have been, in fact, more so with more Lucy than Donna, being Lucy's also from Liverpool, like Samantha Briggs. So she would have been the Lucy Miller of the 60s, and on screen. So, yeah, that would have been cool. And she actually does some really helpful stuff, so she's probably one of the better side characters and allies of this era. So, yeah, does a really good job. But we get saddled with Victoria instead, who is introduced in number 5, The Evil of the Daleks from Season 4. Now, I will say this for Victoria, for her first few stories, she's actually pretty good, despite some some not so good moments, or points, I should say. But around Ice Warriors time, she starts to go down, in my opinion, as a character, until she eventually leaves. Eventually. But I don't think she was too bad in her first 3 stories, and this is her first, and she does a pretty good story here. It's a good job here, and Jamie is great. He's one of his best points, and Kemmel is a great supporting character. The Second Doctor is at his best in this season, and it's just a really great story. And the Daleks have a spectacular final story to go out on, and it's just really enjoyable. So, there you go. No more Daleks until we get into, well, nearly halfway through John Pertwee's era with Season 9's opener, Day of the Daleks. So, right, we'll get more Dalek stories over the next 2 years as well. Okay, so, moving on to number 4. Number 4 is was a surprising I surprisingly loved this more on this rewatch than I ever did, which is a surprise considering it was one of the ones I watched quite a few times when I was younger, when I only had a few stories on DVD, and this one was one of those ones. And this is The Invasion from Season 6. With beautiful Cosgrove animated episodes of the missing episodes, reanimated missing episodes, this story just had so much goodness to it. I had to eventually give it a 10 out of 10, which was a surprise to me as well as for presumably you viewers. Although Jack McCulloch says this is his favourite Cyberman story, so you know what, I can't blame you for that, Jack. It's a great one, and yeah, I just really loved it on the rewatch, and just had a great moment. Admittedly, like War Games, I did after watching half this, like, okay, I'll carry on. It's so fun. The next couple of bits ones weren't so good, not good, but not so fun. But then it got more fun later on to the end, and was very enjoyable. So The Invasion, it's a great, great story, and another great Cyberman story. Now moving on to the top 3 territory, and my friend Matt Moyer will be glad to see this episode as my third choice, although he'd probably prefer it to be number 1. But he'll be glad to see it as number 3 at least. So, number 3 is, of course, The Enemy of the World from Season 5. This story is almost perfect. In fact, I might even go as far as say it probably is perfect, actually. This story is amazing. It's Bond, it's Doctor Who does Bond, and it's brilliant. The characters are great. Bennick is an amazing villain. Patrick Troughton gives his best performance of the entire show, mainly as Salamander. I think his best performance of the Doctor was elsewhere. I think in Tomb of the Cybermen. But as Salamander, he gives his best performance ever. And everybody else just does a good job. I did say Victoria did go down as a character after Abominable Snowmen, but I think this and Web of Fear are not as bad as Ice Warriors and Fury from the Deep. I think she actually does some very good stuff here, and is a very good character, but I don't think she's quite as strong as her first 3 stories, Victoria, but not as bad as Ice Warriors or Fury 1, and this can also be said for the Web of Fear, but more here than Web. And it's just some really great stuff in this story. This is such a great story. I'm so glad that they've managed to find all of it. And I'd be glad if they found fucking space pirates. But, well, Survivor, the missing episodes of that. But this story in particular, it just looks amazing. And is just amazing. So, yeah. Just so great. Number 2. Number 2 is a story that is, well, whilst Enemy of the World was quite a down-to-earth, serious story, my number 2 story is a bit more of a fantasy imaginative story, and it's so fun, it's so enjoyable, and it's so good. It achieves its goals on so many levels, and ultimately it just becomes a super successful story, and ultimately easily my second favourite story of the Troughton era. Number 2 is The Mind Robber from Season 6. Just really enjoyable, really imaginative, some great characters, fictional from other properties like Rapunzel and the Minotaur and so on, but also some brand new fictional characters like the Carcass, and how characters are used in this story. They're just so really great, and it's just really interesting. I would love to know a bit more about the land of fiction and the master computer, but as it is, it's still a marvellous story and really enjoyable, really imaginative, and it's just super great. But my number one story is one that I personally love above all else, despite some flaws of how it was written at the time. But despite that, it's just a marvellous, beautiful, enjoyable and lovable story. Number one from Season 5 is, of course, The Tomb of the Cybermen. This story is in my top 10 stories of all time, and I just bloody love it. Patrick Troughton is at his best as the Doctor. Of course, I think his best performance overall would come in Enemy of the World as Salamander, but as the Doctor, his best performance is in part 3 of this story with that beautiful speech, and I'm getting a bit emotional just thinking about it. Oh God, not again. Well, here we go again. But the rest of the story is beautiful. There's a great story. The characters are mostly great, even if most of them are stereotypes. And there is a little bit of, alongside that stereotyping, there's a little bit of slight sexism and racism within the writing. Of all the stories to have it very noticeable, it's this one, the best one at the time. Jesus Christ, writers. But despite that, it's still an amazing story, and the Cybermen just add to the level of greatness and provide a really enjoyable second half of the story. Though the human villains also are able to carry the first half really well. In fact, they're not even that villainous until in part 2, to be honest. So, yeah, got some really great moments, and it's just really amazing. So, there you go. The Tomb of the Cybermen is my favourite Patrick Troughton story, and is currently my favourite Doctor Who story of all time at the time of the going in order, and overall is still one of my top 10 favourite stories. Mind-Robber and Enemy of the World could probably be in the top 20, top 30, but for Tomb of the Cybermen is definitely top 10, easily. Not top 5. We haven't got to any in my top 5 just yet. That'll be coming with the next story that will beat Tomb of the Cybermen as the current favourite in order in going from start to finish. The next story that the next story that takes over, that becomes that when I see it, which will take over Tomb of the Cybermen, that will be a top 5er, and then after that will just be the ones that will beat that will be top 5s, top 5 stories. Yeah, all of them. That'll be that's City of Death, by the way. I believe City of Death will be the next best story. Tomb of the Cybermen will be my favourite current story until we get to there, and then City of Death will be that, and then anything I prefer over City of Death will be top 5 territory, because I believe that City of Death is in my top 5, and anything I prefer over that will be the other 4 stories in my top 5, which are 5 Doctors, Remembrance of the Daleks, which will both beat City of Death, and then Remembrance will beat 5 Doctors, Bad Wolf Parting the Ways, and Day of the Doctor, which will then beat Remembrance as the all-time positions. But Bad Wolf Parting the Ways will not beat Remembrance, but it will be a top 5 story. Just like how the Demons and the Ark in Space and the Attack of the Cybermen are not going to beat Tomb and Blink as well. And they're not going to beat Tomb, but they're still going to be top 10s. So that's it for my top 10 Second Doctor story ranking. I'll just go through the list again. Number 10 is The Wheel in Space. Number 9 is The War Games. Number 8 is The Power of the Daleks. Number 7 is The Moon Base. Number 6 is The Faceless Ones. Number 5 is The Evil of the Daleks. Number 4 is The Invasion. Number 3 is The Enemy of the World. Number 2 is The Mind-Robber. And number 1 is The Tomb of the Cybermen. So that's it from me. Thank you for watching. I've got one more ranking to do. The top 10 Doctor Who stories from the 1960s. So this will cover every story since An Unearthly Child up to the War Games. And which are my top 10 stories of the decade. Similarly, my 70s one will cover every story from Spearhead from Space to The Horns of Nimon. It's 80, and that story is 79 to 80, so that will Horns of Nyman will also be done, considered for 80 stories. So 80s will be every story from Horns of Nyman to Survival, and we'll do mid to late 2000s, which is every story from Rose to the End of Time. Again, that story is split over 2009 to 2010, so 2010's one will be every story from the End of Time to at the current time resolution. But if they change it to a 2019 Christmas special instead of a 2020 New Year special, or if there's another sneaky or if there's a sneaky extra episode or two later in the year, then it'll go up to that. But at the current time, it's probably going to be End of Time to resolution for the 2010s ranking. And I'll also do, like I said, I'm going to be reviewing content from the Wilderness years. So, Search Out in Space, Doctor Who Special, Dimensions in Time, More Than 30 Years in the TARDIS, I've done Whatever Happened to Susan already, the TV movie, possibly Anthony Amy's Destiny of the Doctor segments. Possibly I'm not going to review the actual game because I don't have it. Curse of the Fatal Death, Death Comes to Time webcast, Real-Time webcast, Sharda 8th Doctor version webcast, and Scream of the Shauka. So, those ones will be done. The part of my Wilderness Years era reviews. So, I'll be doing those, and I'll be doing worst to best of the 90s ones, which are Search in Space, Doctor Who Special, to Curse of the Fatal Death, and the early to mid 2000 ones are the webcasts and Scream of the Shauka. So, yeah, it'll be a very short early 2000s ranking then. So, that's basically what's coming up with the 60s, with the decade rankings, basically. So that's it from me. Thank you for watching this rankings, and after I've done the 60s one, we'll start the Jon Pertwee era with Spearhead from Space from Season 7. And I can safely say that story will be on the Jon Pertwee ranking, overall ranking. Whether it'll be on the entire 70s one or not is probable, actually. I think very highly probable, but even more so on the 3rd Doctor ranking, because the 70s one's also got to cover the 4th Doctor as well, apart from his last season, and Sharda. Anyway, that's it from me. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Nicholas Payne Retro YouTube channel. No, nothing else. Nothing else. Beyond those. Well, let's start again. Fuck, I forgot to say the War Games was from Season 6. The War Games. The Power of the Daleks. Did I say the Wheel in Space from Season 5? The Wheel in Space. Okay, future me, could you add those back in to those earlier slots? If the Wheel in Space has got it, then don't worry too much. From Season 4. Moving on to... Oh, I forgot the rankings. From the seasons. This story is in my top 10 stories of all time, and I just... Hold on. So, that's it from my Season 6 ranking. Sorry, my... So that's it from my 2nd Doctor ranking, stories ranking, top 10, and number 1 is Attack